You've been drinking coffee for years, and you probably consider it part of your healthy routine. No sugar, no milk. Maybe you even take pride in it. What no one has explained to you clearly is that after 50, the liver processes caffeine differently, and that there is a silent difference without obvious symptoms at first, maybe affecting exactly what you're trying to protect, not because coffee is bad for you, but because the amount you tolerated at 40 is no longer the same as what your body can handle today. Today, science has an answer, and it may not be what you expect. Before we get into that, I need to dismantle something, an idea that you've been repeating for years without questioning. Do you know what it's like to wake up in the morning and feel like your sleep wasn't really restorative? Do you know what it's like to have a dry mouth the moment you open your eyes? Do you know what it's like to feel that diffuse weight on the right side of your abdomen and think it's a mattress or the position or simply your age? And you know what it's like to need coffee to get going, not because you enjoy it, but because without it, it doesn't start. That's not a habit. It's a sign. This didn't start yesterday. The pattern you describe, that functional dependence on morning coffee because the body didn't start on its own, usually takes months to build, sometimes years. A large proportion of men in this age group continue to consume the same coffee they had when they were 40 without asking themselves if their liver processes it the same, without relating what they drink in the afternoon to how they wake up the next day. And there's a specific mechanism that connects those two things: caffeine consumption later in the day and the actual quality of nighttime rest that the body has been processing silently obliquo. And there's a specific reason why that connection goes so unnoticed. It's not that you've been doing things wrong. It's that the information you had was incomplete. With the right information, your decisions are different. What happens in your arteries and in your liver doesn't end when you leave the cup in the sink. Research on vascular recovery and hepatic metabolism indicates that caffeine can remain active in the system for hours, and that this process contains PSPs during sleep. In men over 50, whose caffeine elimination rate tends to be slower, this residual effect can alter the deep sleep phase without the man feeling like he slept badly. What you feel when you wake up, that heaviness, that dry mouth, that energy that doesn't start to buoy tinato, is the accumulated result of this process, not of one night, of a pattern that repeats itself. That's precisely why I prepared something Moses specifically for this group of men. The digital book, Dala 7 Habits That Make You Wake Up Tired After 40. You'll identify which of your daily habits, the one you least suspect, is connected to the vascular recovery that occurs while you sleep. A habit that you've never related to how you wake up. You'll understand why the body after 50 has a different tolerance margin than it did 10 years ago. And what does that mean in practice for day-to-day decisions? And you'll learn what a specific adjustment you can make this week without eliminating coffee, which can change how you wake up the following days. Designed for the man who wants to understand the root cause, not just manage the symptoms. And there's something inside that surprises most. Among the 7 habits, there's one directly related to nocturnal liver metabolism, which most repeat in their afternoon consumption, which they consider harmless without knowing what they're accumulating. If any of what you just heard sounded familiar, Dil is in the pinned comment. Liver metabolism doesn't recover what it loses each night. The first step is to know which of these habits is yours. The right information at the right time changes decisions. That's what we do here. I'm Carmen Navarro. For more than 20 years, I've been researching and sharing scientific studies on men's health to help men make informed decisions. So what I've observed time and time again is that when it comes to food, the right question is almost never what to eat, but how and when. And today I'm going to show you exactly what coffee does to your body after 50. Not what you've heard, but what the science says. Let's start from the beginning. Imagine that your nervous system has an alarm switch. When it's activated, your entire system goes into high alert mode. Your heart races, your blood vessels constrict slightly, your liver releases glucose. Are you ready to take action? Caffeine just presses that switch. It doesn't break it, activate it. The problem isn't with the switch, it's how many times you push it and what time you let push it, because that needs time to return to its resting position. And in the body of a 55-year-old man, Balle, that time is considerably longer than it was when you were 35 when you were younger. Your liver processed caffeine very quickly, Balle. You'd have your coffee at 5 a.m. and by 9 p.m., your system had pretty much handled it. You could go to sleep without too much work to do. Today, that process is different, not because coffee has changed, but because the liver that receives it is no longer the same as before. Before explaining the mechanisms in detail, I want you to get to know Manuel, because his story illustrates exactly why this topic matters. Manuel was 61 years old and had been drinking coffee since he was 23 cups a day, one upon waking, one after lunch, and one in the middle of the afternoon to get through the 5 a.m. meeting. Nothing he considered excessive. For almost a year, he had been waking up with what he called the slow start. It wasn't exactly tiredness. It was as if his body was taking a long time to get going. He would stay in bed 10 minutes after his alarm went off. Not because he was sleepy, but because getting up required an effort that it hadn't required before. He thought it was his age, that at 60, that's how the body works. What he hadn't made the connection was the 5 a.m. cup, or what happened to it while he slept. When he understood the mechanism, what does caffeine do during sleep, and why the liver of a 60-year-old man processes it differently, he made a single decision: to move that rate from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. without eliminating it, without reducing the amount with reducing. Several weeks later, he began to notice that he was waking up before his alarm went off, not every day, but with a frequency that he had not remembered in a long time. He assigned no cause to the change. He merely knew something had shifted. That is what happens when you identify the right habit, not the most obvious one, the one that was going unnoticed. Now let's understand why. Caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. When it enters the system, it causes blood vessels to contract slightly. In the short term, this temporarily raises pressure and speeds up flow in certain areas. For a 35-year-old man with agile circulation, this effect is brief and the body regulates it easily. Research on vascular function in men over 50 indicates that arterial elasticity tends to decrease with the age. The walls of the blood vessels lose some of their rapid response capacity, and this changes how the body manages the vasoconstrictor effect. In practice, the constriction can be more pronounced and longer, lasting. The arteries need more time to return to their baseline state after each dose. When the last coffee is drunk late in the afternoon, this vasoconstriction process can extend into the first hours of sleep. And during sleep, the cardiovascular system needs exactly the opposite. Vascular relaxation, a drop in heart rate, and recovery of arterial tone. It is in this nocturnal window that the heart and blood vessels do part of their repair work. When residual caffeine interferes with this process, sleep does occur, but not in the same way. Many men report that by adjusting the time of the last coffee without changing anything else, they notice improvements in the quality of their rest that they were not expecting. They do not sleep more hours, but the sleep they do have is different, more restful. Circulation is only part of what happens. What the liver does in the meantime is the part that surprises most. There's something about liver metabolism that this video hasn't fully covered yet that directly impacts what happens while you sleep. What your liver does with caffeine doesn't end when you feel like the effects of coffee have worn off. Research on caffeine elimination in men over 50 suggests that this process can extend well into the sleep period. And during those hours, Residual liver load competes with the recovery processes that your body needs to complete. What you feel when you wake up, that heaviness, that slow start, is the cumulative result of nights where this process didn't quite get done what done. That connection between what you've had in the hours leading up and what your liver does or doesn't complete during sleep is exactly the kind of information that's missing from most conversations about coffee and health. And that's why I created the ebook 7 Habits That Make You Wake Up Tired. After 40, you'll identify which are. Drinking habits are interfering with your liver's nighttime recovery. The ones you associate the least with how you wake up. You'll understand why a 50-year-old man's body processes caffeine differently than a 35-year-old. And what does that mean in practice for timing and quantity? And you'll have a first concrete adjustment with that. And eliminating coffee, which you can apply this week to start noticing a difference in your sleep. Designed for men who want to act on the root cause, not just alleviate what they're feeling. And there's a detail that I don't cover in this video. Among the 7 habits, there's one directly related to nocturnal hepatic metabolism, which most repeat in their afternoon consumption, considering it harmless without realizing what they're accumulating. If any of this sounds familiar, I've left a link in the pinned comment. Check it out. Do you know someone who drinks coffee in the afternoon and complains that they can't sleep well? Share this video with them. Sometimes the answer they're looking for is closer than they think. And let's continue, because the effect on the liver is the one that few men anticipate. The liver is the organ responsible for processing and eliminating caffeine from the body. The speed at which they do this work varies considerably from person to person. And what the research has shown is that it also varies with age. Research on liver metabolism suggests that in men over 50, the liver's ability to eliminate caffeine may be slower than it was in previous decades. This extends the time that caffeine remains active in the system. The practical implication is straightforward. A cup of coffee consumed at 5 p.m. can remain active in the system of a 55-year-old man well into sleep. Not in concentrations that are felt as energy, but in concentrations sufficient to interfere with the deep recovery processes that occur in the early hours of the night. And here comes the connection that fewer men anticipate. The liver not only metabolizes caffeine, it also performs its own purification and repair processes while we sleep. Investigations into the function of the liver during the night indicate that many of these processes peak in activity during deep sleep or when residual caffeine keeps the liver in a state of metabolic alert, some of that repair energy is redirected. What the liver should be doing at night is done more partially. And what you feel in the morning, that feeling that you didn't get enough rest, even though you slept the necessary hours, has a more direct relationship with this process than it seems. The information you are receiving is educational. It is not a substitute for medical advice. If your symptoms persist, talk to a health professional. But the most silent mechanism is the third one, because it has to do with something that no man associates with coffee. There is something that most studies on caffeine do not clearly communicate. The effect is not just for today, it is cumulative. The liver has adaptation mechanisms. When it receives the same load of caffeine for months and years, it develops metabolic tolerance. That means it needs to work harder to assess the same amount too. And this additional work sustained over time can translate into a functional load that the liver of a 55-year-old man handles differently than that of a 35-year-old. Research on chronic liver load indicates that the accumulation of sustained metabolic stress can contribute to reduced efficiency in nocturnal recovery processes without the man associating it with any clear symptoms in his day-to-day life. It is not a disease. It is not a diagnosis. It is a pattern that builds up slowly and is rarely connected to the habit that originates it. Do you remember Manuel? 3 cups a day, without sugar, without milk, an intake that he considered reasonable, honorable. For years, the pattern developed without anyone pointing it out to him, not because he was careless, but because no one had to explain to him that the liver of a 61-year-old does not process the same as that of a 40-year-old, that the rate of 5K that at 40 disappeared from the system before falling asleep now continued active while he slept. The good news is that the pattern is also reversible, and the adjustments that make a difference are smaller than expected. Published research on caffeine metabolism in older adults suggests that the elimination half-life may be considerably longer in men over 50 than in younger adults. The same intake produces a longer residual effect. Studies on the vascular effect of caffeine suggest that the induced vasoconstriction may be more pronounced in those with lower baseline arterial elasticity. What the studies don't say is that there is no universal number that is too much for every man over 50. What they do say is that the amount, timing, and the liver and vascular condition of each man determine the real impact on me. What works for one may be too much for another, with a slower rate of metabolism. Science offers no number, but a framework allowing each man to grasp his own meaning. 3 adjustments that research on caffeine consumption in older adults suggests have the greatest impact on nighttime recovery. The first is the timing of the last coffee. Research suggests that setting a break in the early afternoon can have a significant effect on the quality of deep sleep in men over 50. It's not about eliminating coffee. It's about moving the last drink to the body has enough time to process the caffeine before sleep. The difference between drinking at 5 a.m. and drinking at 2 a.m. can mean the difference between a slow start and a different awakening for many men. The second is the distribution of consumption throughout the day. Many men concentrate most of their intake in the early morning hours and increase their dose again in the late afternoon. Research on liver load suggests that distributing consumption more gradually can reduce metabolic pressure without reducing total consumption. The liver handles the same amount better when it comes in smaller waves than when it comes in concentrated peaks. The third is hydration as an accompaniment. Caffeine has a mild diuretic effect. In men over 50, whose thirst sensation tends to be less precise, this may contribute to a state of mild chronic dehydration that coffee alone does not compensate for. Many men report that accompanying each cup with a glass of water changes how they feel throughout the day in ways they didn't expect. If you notice that the pattern of morning tiredness persists even after adjusting your coffee schedule, or if you have a history of altered liver function or high blood pressure, it's time to take your doctor to the doctor's office. The information in this video is useful. Your doctor's evaluation, along with your tests and history, is what decides. This week, move your last coffee to before 2 p.m. just for 7 days. Just for 7 days. And tell me in the comments if you notice any difference when you wake up. I'm interested in knowing. Today, we're going to talk about something that most men don't associate with coffee. A habit that you've been defending for decades, and how its quantity can silently affect 2 systems that work at night while you sleep. Not because coffee is the enemy, but because after 50, the rules of metabolism change. And what you did without consequences at 40 may be costing you something that you don't feel until the next morning. Manuel understood it. He didn't change how much coffee he drank. He changed when he drank the last one. He moved just 1 cup and started waking up differently en masse, not because he did something radical, but because he changed the right habit. You have that margin too, and now you know where it is. Every morning is an opportunity to wake up differently. Today, you know how. And waking up differently is not a wish. It's the result of changing something specific. Today, you know what? What's left is to know which of the 7 is yours. Every night that goes by with the same drinking schedule is one more night when the liver arrives in the morning with its work half done. That can be recovered by sleeping more hours. It can be recovered by changing what happens before going to sleep. Get the digital book 7 Habits That Make You Wake Up Tired After 40 now and understand which habits are interfering with your liver recovery each night. It's going to happen tonight anyway. The question is whether it happens with the right habit or the wrong one. The liver's metabolism doesn't recover what it loses each night. The link is in the pinned comment. Check if you're repeating that afternoon consumption without realizing it tonight. Until next time, I'm Carmen Navarro. Stay informed. Stay vital. Your best years are not behind you. They can start now. Important note. This video is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult your doctor before making any changes.